Hello everyone, I'm Hugo.
I'm Jake.
And this is Hugo and Jake, and welcome back to our reading of Jordan B. Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote for Chaos.
This is rule number 2!
Yes, today we're reading the second chapter, rule number 2, treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. And before we actually get into this chapter, I actually want to take a minute and talk about something I actually agree with Jordan Peterson on. It's not an original idea, it's certainly one that's been prevalent in cognitive behavioral therapy for quite a while, and that's this idea of self-care and making sure that you treat yourself well and make sure that you take that time to make yourself presentable, to keep yourself in good shape, in good health, in good hygiene, having a decent self-esteem about yourself and not putting yourself down constantly. These are good things. Jordan Peterson, however, did not invent these things and decided to wrap many of those ideas around much bigger ideas that are worse. So that's mainly what we're going to be talking about today, is all the subordinate leech ideas he sticks onto the good ideas of, hey, maybe be kinder to yourself, which you should be.
The thesis of it even starts out pretty okay. It uses the, we'll call it an allegory, I guess, or just a small story of if you had to take pills for your kidneys because they were shutting down, you went to dialysis or whatever, versus a situation where you had to give pills to your dog, you're more likely to give the pills to your dog instead of the pills to yourself, even though, you're more important, because even, like, if you die due to not taking those pills, the dog still would suffer due to your loss. So, like, I get the thesis of this. The initial bit is absolutely fine. I can't find anything really wrong with it. But then the rest of it, literally, I'll say 85%, maybe more, is, and I'm not making this up, and we're going to read about it, and again, I wasn't looking for it, but I mean, it just hit me in the face. It's just Adam and Eve. Yeah. And I'm not kidding. It's, I was pretty shocked, continuing to read this chapter, waiting for the part where the allegory ended and the rest of the rule happened. Yeah. It doesn't happen.
For instance, he says, people are better at filling and properly administering prescriptive medication to their pets than to themselves. This is actually something I wanted to point out too earlier. Sure. In a part we didn't read when he was talking about people not taking prescriptions. He cites that, and I know there are studies that show people, of course, will cancel prescriptions too early, or they'll stop taking a regimen of antibiotics before they should.
Yeah.
That is true. What he is saying here, that people are better at filling and properly administering prescription medication to their pets, that is an unsourced claim. We don't know that to be a fact. That is something he is just claiming, and you are to either take it or leave it. I'm not saying that's not the case. I don't know. You could maybe even colloquially kind of say, yeah, I could see how that could be the case. But again,
it makes intuitive sense. Now, there are some things that make intuitive sense that are true.
Sure.
Religious belief.
Sure.
Might feel intuitive to someone, but doesn't necessarily make it true.
Yeah. But then he continues, it is difficult to conclude anything from this set of facts except that people appear to love their dogs, cats, ferrets, and birds, and maybe even their lizards, more than themselves. That's, again, a little bit of a leap, I think, to say, even if it is the case that you are more prone to administering medications correctly to your pets than to yourself, does not necessarily mean you love your pets more than yourself. It means you might recognize that the pill takeage is out of the control of the animal, and therefore it is your responsibility.
Because think about the way you have to feed your pills to dogs. Like, if you have to give them heartworm or whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes you gotta force that shit down their throats so they don't get worms on their heart. Yep. It's not because they would self-care, but you didn't give it to. They literally don't think of that because they're not sapient.
Sure. And I recognize that Jordan Peterson's just saying, exactly, you should treat yourself the same way.
Right.
Yeah, but you're kind of following from false premises to begin with, so.
Sure.
Before we get into the other stuff, just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, and again, I think it's important to note that we agree with this overall thesis in a vacuum without the rest of the writing.
Yeah. And then he says, how much shame must exist for something like that to be true, that being people caring more for their pets than themselves. What could it be about people that makes them prefer their pets to themselves? It was an ancient story in the book of Genesis, the first book in the Old Testament, that helped me find an answer to that perplexing question.
And that's what we're going to deal with until the last paragraph of this chapter. I was reading, trying to find, like, the little parts where we weren't discussing Adam and Eve, and there are small bits, but they're buffeted by Adam and Eve on both sides almost the whole time.
That and him continuing to define reality how he sees fit.
He also, we're going to talk about this as we move into this chapter more. I see you have it highlighted. There's he tries to again define reality in like, I don't even know how this serves his argument. Really, I don't understand why it's part of the body of this, because he doesn't continue.
Let me explain something a little more clearly. Some people were kind of being contentious and not agreeing with our definition of his definition of reality. And in order to make sure everyone is on the same page, when we say Jordan Peterson thinks reality is constituent of your beliefs, and that is reality, that is from his own mouth. Let me play some clips here, just in a row, to sort of give you an idea, just so there's no question whether or not that is the case.
Right.
So it seems to me that you're saying that the reductio ad absurdum of a Darwinian conception of knowledge would be, if we ever learned certain truths that got us all killed, well, then that would prove that these things weren't true, or that this was an intellectual dead end.
Yeah, they weren't true enough, I would say.
If knowing what is true got you all killed, well, then that would be a truth that wouldn't be worth knowing, but it wouldn't make it less true, right? So if I say,
So let's imagine for a moment. I understand what you're saying, and I don't see that there's any logical problem with it. But I would say that we're actually starting from different fundamental axioms. Like the fundamental axiom that I'm playing with is something that was basically expressed by Nietzsche. And it's a definition of truth. And so I would say, if it doesn't serve life, it's not true.
you clearly have to have a conception of facts and truth that is possible to know, that exceeds what anyone currently knows and exceeds any concern about whether it is useful or compatible with your own survival even to know these truths.
Okay, well, then I would say that I don't think that facts are necessarily true. I know that I'm gerrymandering the definition of truth, but I'm doing that on purpose because I'm trying to nest truth within a Darwinian framework, which I think is a moral framework.
You're choosing, following Nietzsche here, you're choosing to use the word true. You're choosing to freight it with some moral concerns that will make it very difficult for people to understand what you mean and for you to understand what they mean when you use truth as a synonym for, as you just said, correct. A fact may be correct, but it's not true.
Right.
It seems to me this is counterproductive, and you lose nothing by granting that the truth value of a proposition can be evaluated whether or not this is a fact worth knowing or whether or not it's dangerous to know.
No, but that's the thing I don't agree with, because I think that that's the kind of conception of what constitutes a fact that does in fact present a moral danger to people, a mortal danger to people.
I think you're simply deciding at the end of the day to say that any truths that led us down a path where we suffered unnecessarily or died weren't true.
Right. You have to choose what you mean by true. You have to. And I'm not accepting the same definition of truth that you operate under, and it's partly because I believe that Darwin trumps realism, let's say. I believe that pragmatism trumps realism.
Your concept of truth is collapsing everything back to whether we survive.
Right.
Presumably whether we survive happily, right?
No, just whether or not we survive.
I think you are committed to elevating the concept of truth, or what you imagine to be elevating it, into this kind of the moral stratosphere where it entails goodness.
That is precisely and exactly what I'm doing. There's no doubt about it. Well, we're definitely disagreeing. I think you understand me, and I think...
I don't think we are disagreeing. I think you are committed to elevating the concept of truth, or what you imagine to be elevating it, into this kind of the moral stratosphere where it entails goodness.
That is precisely and exactly what I'm doing. There's no doubt about it.
And if you think we're taking them out of context, maybe you're just taking us out of context. Watch our entire body of work before you can negatively comment on our videos. Because then you're just an uneducated swine at this point, really. That's really what it is, right? Or maybe we can give each other the benefit of the doubt, and everything we say from here on out, including Jordan Peterson, we take at face value and in context of the rest of the book we've already read.
Sure.
Because that's how you read a book, is from A to B, not from A to C to B.
Sure.
Right?
Okay.
I think that's pretty reasonable, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so choose. Because if we're taking them out of context, you're taking us out. Saying.
He goes on to talk about, and he says, scientific truths were made explicit a mere 500 years ago with the works of Francis Bacon, René Descartes, and Isaac Newton. In whatever manner our forebears viewed the world prior to that, it was not through a scientific lens, any more than they could view the moon and the stars through the glass lens of an equally recent telescope. Because we are so scientific now and so determinately materialistic, it is very difficult for us to even understand that other ways of seeing can and do exist. But those who existed during the distant time in which the foundational epochs of our cultures emerged were much more concerned with the actions that dictated survival and with interpreting the world in a manner commensurate with that goal, than with anything approximating what we might understand as objective truth. Before the dawn of the scientific worldview, reality was construed differently. Being was understood as a place of action, not a place of things. It was understood as something more akin to a story or a drama. That story or drama was lived, subjective experience as it manifested itself moment to moment in the consciousness of every living being.
There's quite a bit there.
Yeah.
He does the same thing we were talking about with the lobster hierarchy in the last chapter. If you haven't seen that, you should watch that. It's serial on purpose. Basically, old things, old ideas are inherently more valuable or virtuistic, or whatever the word would be, virtuous, based on their age alone, based on the length of time for which they have existed.
Sure.
And not even in like an actual tangible way, but like very metaphysically. Like, because there's not actually a way to say, because he'll claim later on that like 1 billion years ago, this was the way reality was interpreted because of, you know, your perceived actions. Or like, okay, I guess, but like that's not really valuable at all. That's just saying that like our sensory organs operated and we synthesized information in this way, and that's how we perceived reality. Like, that's how we perceive reality now.
His entire line of thought falls apart because he starts talking about, you know, before science, which is only recent, in the past 500 years or so, people perceive the world not as objective truths or an objective reality, but a place where dramas took place.
That's not really true
That's
at all.
not the case, because the allegory of Plato's cave predates Christianity by quite a while, and that's like the foundational, like, parable, if you will, in philosophy to be like reality, objective reality might exist out there, and we are all looking at it through some sort of lens of perception.
Yeah, and
people were aware of the concept of self-awareness and reality and objective reality. This is not new.
And it's not even Plato. Like, it's just like any philosophers back then, and however you weight philosophy is fine, but he's philosophizing right now.
Yeah.
About this, like this whole book is basically that. And there's some fans of Jordan Peterson who are like, I don't like philosophy. I think they're all hacks. You read this shit? Like, a lot of it's just philosophical. It's musings. It's a thought experiment that this guy's going through that you buy for some reason, both, you know, actually and metaphorically. The idea that objective truths didn't exist before 500 years ago, before we had, like, actual science, I guess, even though, I mean, however you want to describe that, people were doing actual science anytime they did trial and error. That's actual science, just because you don't have names for that at that time, just because you don't have scientists at that time. Science it doesn't have to have, like, doctors and scientists and PhDs, and you don't need physics. You can literally just, like, does the ball roll down the hill better this way, or if I throw it, or if I throw it up and then it rolls? Like, there's no, like, kids do science.
It's this weird obsession he has with making his language incredibly flowery, incredibly, how do I put this? His prose are very novelesque. Does that make sense?
No, it does.
He
They're
wants
very,
to paint a very dramatic picture. Like
well, they are dramatic. Anything that is good to him, to Jordan Peterson, is painted with it's rose-colored glasses. Really, it's got this sort of like majesty to it. It's got this poetry involved with it, and then anything that is negative in his view, again, chaos being feminine, etc. He starts putting periods at the end of sentences instead of being long and prosy. It's very like, this is pain, this is suffering, this is, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, so
let me give you an example.
It's intentional.
In any case, that which we subjectively experience can be likened much more to a novel or a movie than the scientific description of physical reality. It's the dream of a lived experience, the unique, tragic, potential death of your father, compared to the objective death listed in the hospital records, the pain of your first love, the despair of dashed hopes, the joy attendant upon a child's success. He speaks the language. He has a great emotional vocabulary. Yeah, he speaks in the vocabulary of emotion and tries to get you to liken things in the world and liken things that he wants you to liken them to these strong feelings and have these strong feelings about things. And aren't all these feelings what matters? Again, very postmodernist for a guy who doesn't seem to like postmodernists very much.
To me, it speaks to why his target audience is someone that would feel very strongly towards a catchphrase such as "Make America Great Again." And that's not to say that every Jordan Peterson fan is a Trump supporter. I'm not saying that. No. It's just that what "Make America Great Again" evokes in people that really respond positively to it, this same language evokes positively to them, because I don't know how to make it sound any other way than he's kind of tricking people. He's kind of tricking people into buying the premise and then laying out the premise by wrapping it up in these nice little pretty words. Does that make sense?
He goes on. Chaos is the domain of ignorance itself. It's unexplored territory. Chaos is what extends externally and without limits, beyond the boundaries of all states, all ideas, all disciplines. It's the foreigner, the stranger, the member of another gang, the rustle in the bushes in the nighttime, the monster under the bed, the hidden anger of your mother, the sickness of your child. I like that it's not like the hidden anger of your father either. It's the mother. He always goes to feminine. It's so weird.
It is weird.
Chaos is the despair and horror you feel when you have been profoundly betrayed. It's the place you end up when things fall apart, when your dreams die, your career collapses, or your marriage ends. It's the underworld of fairy tale and myth, where the dragon and the gold it guards externally coexist.
Yeah, I think before this he had invoked Smaug from
yes.
Smaug from Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit.
He was talking about how the Hobbiton is
a place of order.
Is a place of order,
even to the naive, I believe he says.
Yes,
or ignorant.
But the minds of the dwarves, they're chaos.
Yeah, because Smaug takes over. Because they have gold.
Yeah,
I don't understand really the metaphor. It's not a very good one. It's.
So Jordan Peterson again continues on about chaos and order, and he talks about chaos, and very much connects it to women for some reason. Again, you can talk to me about Adam and Eve, he's certainly going to, but at the end of the day, that black and white framing, the Pandora's box, the whatever, it's a very specific way of looking at archetypes. There are other archetypes, he chooses the ones he hones in on.
The ones he hones in on are almost exclusively biblical.
Yeah. Anyway, chaos is also the formless potential from which the God of Genesis I called forth under using language at the beginning of time. It's the same potential from which we, made in that image, call forth the novel and ever-changing moments of our lives. And chaos is freedom, dreadful freedom too. Order, by contrast, is explored territory. That's the hundreds of millions of years old hierarchy of place, position, and authority. That's the structure of society. There he goes again with saying that the dominance hierarchy of society...
It's just the way it should be.
It's just the way it is and should be.
Yeah. Also, there's this kind of way that he, when he reads this book, or when he writes this book and you read it, he constantly, and I don't know if this is because he claims he's not a religious man. He constantly goes like, "Oh, fundamentalists, they're bad. They're just as bad." And I respect atheists because they don't fall into fundamentalist traps very often.
He says he respects atheists,
I know.
and then turns around and says he doesn't think atheists
I
are
absolutely,
atheists.
No, I totally agree with you. So I don't know if he does this on purpose or whatever. But he always frames the God of the Bible, this right now God of Genesis, as like a good force.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's to try to get a Christian audience to agree with him, which could absolutely be.
I can see.
Or to try to get people that aren't that to be that, which I can also see. It might be both, honestly, because he toes the line between the two without ever actually taking a stance because, you know, it's effective, I guess. It's just really interesting. The more you read this, the more times he'll use words like sin and walking with God is a common term that he brings up in this chapter.
It's a main wrap-up theme.
It is a main wrap-up. Like, to walk with God is to be... So, like, what are you trying to get across? Are you trying... The idea, again, you mentioned this when we started this, like, PewDiePie was like, whoa, this is religious? Come on, Pewds. The fuck, man? It's very clearly religious. Like, you can't read chapter 3 and avoid it. You can't read any of it and avoid it, but at least the other ones were a little bit shorter. This entire chapter is Adam and Eve.
Yeah. Anyway, continuing. Order is tribe, religion, hearth, home, and country. It's the warm, secure living room where the fireplace glows and the children play. Again, do you see this?
It's so flowery and poetic. It tastes like soft-baked cookies at Grandma's house. You know what I'm saying?
It's the flag of the nation. It's the value of our currency. Order is the floor beneath your feet and your plan for the day. It's weird, like, gross fashy light imagery.
I don't know about fashy. It's nationalistic-y.
It's hard nationalism. Get your mom's apple pie. Get the American flag. Let's go bomb some people in the Middle East.
He's Canadian, so
I know he's Canadian.
But
I understand.
Yeah,
that.
I just it's got this 1950s classic Americana feel. That he's tapping into. And it's not just for Americans because, I mean, people felt this all over the world at different times.
Yeah.
Like the Great British Empire has felt it. Indians have felt it.
Yeah.
I mean, Chinese, Japanese. It doesn't matter what culture you're from. You have this nationalistic past at some point. Maybe current now, or like maybe right now in America. Russia. It's so impressive. Like that no one like who reads this, besides a small minority apparently, like us and some other people that have read it, go, oh, okay, propaganda guy, can we calm the fuck down and actually get to the point here?
Where everything is certain, we're in order. We're there when things are going according to plan and nothing is new and disturbing. In the domain of order, things behave as God intended. We like to be there.
Things behave as God intended. Like, this is not a phrase you use from even a neutral state. Like, you don't use this if you're on the fence.
That's not a phrase you use metaphorically. That's not
just
something
isn't.
you say metaphorically. It's...
And like, some people, again, in the comments last time were like, I think your atheism is clouding... I'm an atheist. I'm not that much of an anti-theist to where I don't think you can invoke these things. Like... It can be done. There's a really fantastic, there's a song I like a lot. And there's a line in it that says, never trust a millionaire, quoting the Sermon on the Mount.
Sure.
I agree with that. That's very interesting to me. And that's the kind of like, while I don't agree with the Sermon on the Mount, it is hypocritical for a millionaire to, take care of the poor and, be meek. The meek shall inherit the earth. Like, so I'm not so anti-theist that I can't, like, find value in these ancient words.
Sure.
At times.
Absolutely.
In certain contexts. This is not what that is. This is like, no. If you are to find order, that is the way. You're living as if the way God intended. You are living a godly life. You are walking alongside God. It reads like a preacher.
When your tax return has been filed, that's order. When you're audited, that's chaos. Most people would rather be mugged than audited. Before the Twin Towers fell, that was order. Chaos manifested itself afterward. Everyone felt it. The very air became uncertain.
What?
What exactly was it that fell? Wrong question. What exactly remained standing? That was the issue at hand.
Okay. There's some more... Now, this is intentional Americana.
I think more than anything, this goes to expose sort of the problem with trying to put things into categories of either A or B in any circumstances.
Sure.
This is why you can't do that with things in the world. Things are more complicated than that. You can't just say things are order and chaos. What do you mean it was order before 9/11 and chaos after? Certainly I can viscerally understand what you mean by that. It brings to mind images of that day.
He's
images of
intentionally
first responders.
evoking... the Twin Towers disaster. But before that, literally the year before, you think order was people freaking out about Y2K? Like, I remember that. I was there. I remember people literally, like, Columbine, 1997, the Iran-Contra deal before that. Like, Somalia with President Clinton. Black Hawk Down. I believe that was Somalia. I could be wrong. Desert Storm.
It's just pandering. It's annoying. Chaos is the deep ocean bottom to which Pinocchio voyaged to rescue his father from Monstro, whale and fire-breathing dragon.
He constantly, if it's not biblical references or a very brief celebrity or scientist reference, I think the number 2 most common reference he makes to literature or any media outside of the Bible, number 2,
Pinocchio?
is Disney.
Disney? It's probably the things he said.
He'll list several things later on. He'll say, Pinocchio, Beauty and the Beast, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella.
Specifically the ones Disney has adapted in
Yes!
movies.
Yes! I don't understand why! Why does he the idea of Jordan Peterson just fresh off a Patreon stream, wiping his eyes from his good weep, and then turning on some Pinocchio... He's going, yeah, this is really good. I'm going to write it in a book.
That journey into darkness and rescue is the most difficult thing a puppet must do. He wrote that in a book, and the editor was like, yes.
Yeah. A puppet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Order is the stability of your marriage. It's the buttressed by traditions of the past and by your expectations, grounded, often invisibly, in those traditions. Chaos is that stability crumbling under your feet when you discover your partner's infidelity.
Again!
Like what the 4th fucking time he brings this up.
Jordan, I'm sorry, but
Jordan,
like, you gotta...
who hurt you?
Do you want to be held, my friend? I'll embrace you.
Chaos and order are 2 of the most fundamental elements of lived experience, 2 of the most basic subdivisions of being itself. Again, remember, being with a capital B is how he defines reality for some reason. But they're not things or objects. They're not experienced as such. Things or objects are part of the objective world. They're inanimate, spiritless. They're dead. That's not true of order and chaos. Those are perceived, experienced, and understood, to the degree that they are understood at all, as personalities. And that is just as true of perceptions, experiences, and understanding of modern people as their ancient forebearers. It's just that moderners don't notice.
Moderners... our intellect. We are not tapping into what our forebearers had in mind. Like we don't understand reality because we're materialistic and secular. But the forebears who didn't have those concepts, now they were really on the nose there.
This is where we start getting trouble with the when he's talking about chaos being feminine, it's all a metaphor. He starts bringing it out of the realm of metaphor a little bit in these next few pages.
A little bit?
And starts dragging it right into reality, where he says, oh no, when I'm talking about that chaos as a thing, we mean in personalities. You know, the personalities women have.
I mean, he'll literally use the term bitchy later.
Anyway, the personalities we have evolved to perceive have been around in predictable form and in typical hierarchical configurations forever. For all intents and purposes, they have been male and female. For example, for 1 billion years, that's a long time.
Yeah, we know how long 1 billion is.
The divisions of life into its twin sexes occurred before the evolution of multicellular animals. It was in a still respectable 1/5 of that time that mammals who take extensive care of their young emerged. Thus the category of parent and or child has been around for 200 million years. That's longer than birds have existed. That's longer than flowers have grown. It's not a billion years, but it's still a very long time. It's plenty long enough for male and female and parent and child to serve as vital and fundamental parts of the environment to which we have adapted.
This is a way to take a naturalist or a materialist, anyone, usually atheists are both of those things, or strongly one. They might be even synonymous to most people. And you make them go, oh, but now I can be conservative about this. Because
not only that, it gives you an out to be potentially transphobic, because this is a new thing that's just cropping up. It's not a new thing, it's just that there's more, eyeballs on it than ever. But they might say, like, oh, this is a new thing, men and women, it's been a thing for billions of years, this is nature, you're abnormal, you're a fucking... It
also implies procreation is part of the natural order, and thusly is virtuous. It's not very veiled here. It's pretty obvious what he's saying.
It's a conflation between traditional, male-female nuclear family systems and seeing that as an ideal.
And by the way, I'm taking him out of context right now. I guess. But see, the thing is, they're going to say you have to watch a bunch of his other stuff to understand the context. The reason I even have this opinion of this paragraph the way it is, right? Like the reason I think that it's conservative is because of the other material that he's put out.
If I just read this book, I might not pick up on it. It's
right.
That's
what I'm saying.
You hear him say.
That's context, people. That's actual context.
Yeah. When we first began to perceive the unknown, chaotic, non-animal world, we used categories that had originally evolved to represent the pre-human animal social world. Our minds are far older than mere humanity. Our categories are far older than our species. Our most basic category, as old in some sense as the sexual act itself, appears to be that of sex, male and female. We appear to have taken that primordial knowledge of structured creative opposition and begun to interpret everything through its lens.
So, the most basic thing about us is sex?
I disagree.
I disagree strongly. I'd say it's the urge to reproduce and gain resources, like probably gain resources and then reproduce, because you need those to do that. Which you can do asexually.
The paper he uses to cite this, by the way, is from the 1950s.
I'm not surprised.
And it was a Jungian fucking...
It's all, well, he invokes Carl constantly in this book.
Yeah.
I don't... I strongly disagree that biological sex has any bearing on whether or not an organism functions. Like, I don't know, he the way he frames this is like it's inherent to our being.
He frames it as if every single person, like him, I assume, must view everything from is this masculine order or is this feminine?
Like, that's what I mean. Like,
he thinks it's innate, but it's not. It's a way he chooses to view the world, and in such he puts things into categories, and sometimes they don't fit, but then he'll maybe take a hammer and kind of smash it in there, and you know.
Right. Well, what I'm like, the oldest known organisms were multi-sex. So when and could switch in between. Wouldn't that imply that trans, like that's the oldest and most basic? Isn't that most virtuous and good in that scenario?
That's
like
the thing about using nature as a litmus test for what is good and or
that's what
virtuous.
I'm saying.
You can point out anything and say this is comparative to something in human society.
But I mean, we just straight up know that at least as far back as we can see, like RNA, we don't really have the stuff before that, or at least not information on it. That split asexually. That didn't have male or female. That didn't have spermatozoa, or you know what I'm saying? Like it didn't have like any sort of reproductive outside of the cell itself.
He goes on to say,
fucking wild.
This is perhaps because the primary hierarchical structure of human society is masculine, as it is among many animals, including the chimpanzees, who are our closest genetic and arguably behavioral match. It's interesting to me that he outright says, like, the primary hierarchical structure of human society is masculine.
Yes.
But he very specifically says, like, people who say the patriarchy is a thing, Like, I'm not here to say one or the other. I don't have a big opinion on the patriarchy as an entity. But he's literally saying here, like...
Right, it is that.
It is that. Isn't that what he's arguing against when he says, like, social justice warriors shouldn't be arguing against the patriarchy because it doesn't exist?
But he literally makes a case for it existing, which is stronger than any case he's ever made that it doesn't exist. It's so fucking weird to me. Beyond that, he's talking about this now, and he'll bring this up later. I don't even know if you have it highlighted, but he'll talk about, like, basically a woman's birth canal, her hips having to be wide, and a baby's cranium being big, and that's why you gotta take care of them. Like, the reason behind the... he'll use it in the Adam and Eve example as well, saying that, and implying that the way God orders things is good and is virtuous. And the way God orders things is that women have to bear children. That's part of, and it has to be painful birth. That's part of the Adam and Eve stuff. If you watch our Bible study, you know that. By the way, we're on the New Testament. And really, what it is if a woman, specifically a woman that's not in modern times, or even any time where there's even an inkling of a medical practitioner, even a witch doctor,
Sure.
even before that, you start getting... and you see this in animals, when they have one sex that we call female that gives birth. Those are considered the female ones. And there's a reason, because we are all genetically related. We have very similar reproductive capabilities in regards to that. So you need men to go and, because they're not giving birth and they're not disabled for several months at a time.
Sure.
You need them to go, and he says, like, be lumberjacks and build houses.
Oh, I got
gather.
that.
We'll talk to that in a little bit. Which, of course, women do that as well. But you need to do that just to continue the species. But he's saying that is inherently good because it's like, in our biology, ignoring the part of human intervention that he, by the way, claims is really great. Because our intellect and stuff, he stays with that conservative mindset, ignoring that we are beyond that now. We are so far beyond survival. We are at a point in human existence where it has very little to do with our survival. It's very likely you will survive in a developed country, or even even a third world country. They still have infrastructure akin to where you will survive for a good amount of time. Especially longer than the people that wrote the Bible, most likely, right?
Yeah.
We're at a point in time where human life is about comfort and about quality of life, not quantity of life.
Generally.
Yeah, and so why are we ignoring that? Why are we ignoring the part where we as higher intelligent beings have surpassed this thought process?
So Jordan Peterson can sell books to single people who are sad.
Because he's a piece of garbage.
He's an incel. Anyway.
He's a wife.
He goes on to say, here's the part that we were talking about. It is because men are, and throughout history have been, the builders of towns and cities, the engineers, stonemasons, bricklayers, and lumberjacks, the operators of heavy machinery. Order is God the Father, the eternal judge, ledger keeper, and dispenser of rewards and punishments.
What atheist says that?
Order is the peacetime army of policemen and soldiers. It's the political culture. The political culture is... whatever.
Is the political culture order?
Whatever. The corporate environment. The system. It's the they in the... you know what they say. I said they weird. Sorry. You know what they say.
God damn it.
It's credit cards, classrooms, supermarket checkout lineups, turn-taking traffic lights, the familiar routes and daily commuters. Order, when pushed too far, when imbalanced, can also manifest itself destructively and terribly. It does so as the forced migration, the concentration camp, and the soul-devouring uniformity of the goose step.
He'll go on to talk about the Oedipus.
Yeah.
And kind of like, if a overprotect, of course, it's an overprotective mother. Of course. I mean, he invokes concentration camps, implying a Hitler, but he quickly glosses over that. He could easily stick with the concentration camp thing, but no, we're going with overprotective mother who shelters someone. Too much order is a bad thing. So we have to invite chaos, which, again, in a vacuum, outside of this, like, he has, like, a paragraph in here where I go, okay, I can kind of see that. I get that. I understand why you would want someone to have a more well-rounded experience. However, and this is interesting, he'll frame this is the antidote to chaos, by the way. The antidote to cleanse you of chaos implies an abundance of order, which is apparently negative, but it isn't, of course, right? And he's going to say to walk with God. He will mention that you have to cleanse yourself of sins. Of course, that's all metaphor and not real. He'll go on to talk about, basically, we have to build heaven.
Yeah.
We'll talk about this at the end of the book again. Isn't heaven the ultimate version of absolute order? And in that scenario, wouldn't heaven, in its absolute orderliness, be the absolute worst possible outcome? Or is it because it's only heaven and hell, hell is absolute chaos to him? Is that worse than absolute order? He doesn't know, because he doesn't have an answer, because he defines things so sorry, I almost disarmed you.
You did.
He defines things so contradictedly.
I know
They contradict a lot. It just, ooh.
Yep.
It really annoys me.
Going on, he starts to talk about what chaos represents.
Oh, good.
In positive guise, chaos is possibility itself. The source of ideas, the mysterious realm of gestation and birth.
The mysterious realm of... We know what happens during gestation and birth. Does he not?
I don't know, man.
Does he not? No?
I don't know.
Does he not know how?
I don't know
It
if
works.
he knows. As a negative force, it's the impenetrable darkness of a cave, and the accident by the side of the road.
Flashlight.
It's the
Airbag.
It's the mother grizzly, all compassion to her cubs, who
Play dead,
marks
idiot.
you as a potential predator
Jesus.
and tears you to pieces. Chaos, the eternal feminine, is also the crushing force of sexual selection.
Oh, God, here we go. Okay, now, I think this is a good part. Here's where we stop, and we do the transition with the vaporwave.
This is where we get into the language where, if Jordan Peterson doesn't mean to say what he's saying, then he is accidentally speaking incel-ese fluently, constantly.
Yeah.
If this is an accident, it's the most fucking hilarious accident ever, because he talks like, and this is coming
At length.
this is coming from me, he sounds like a neckbeard who has a basement full of swords. And there's nothing wrong with neckbeards or swords or having basements.
Does he have... He does have swords, though, I believe.
He does.
I do.
But you understand the sort of stereotype I'm conjuring in your mind right now, right?
Yeah, okay.
Here's what he has to say.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's a real nice guy. Women are choosy maters, unlike female chimps, their closest animal counterparts.
It sounds like he wants to... like he wishes he was a chimp, and he could just fuck whichever chimp lady he wanted.
Most men do not meet female human standards. Female human standards. Women? You can just say women.
Is
Weirdo.
Jordan Peterson from here?
I don't know.
You
It
think
is-
he's...
He might be a lizard guy, I don't know.
Okay.
It is for this reason that women on dating sites rate 85% of men as below average in attractiveness.
Women on dating site.
That was Match.com. Specifically, I went back. He does have a citation there. It was a study done by, I believe, Match.com, just on their site. Not exactly the most scientific thing in the world, and also dating sites. Not the real world.
He did this with Matt Dillahunty when he said that, I believe it was psilocybin, if people have a spiritual event...
I have ingested psilocybin, by the way.
Sure, which is magic mushrooms.
Yes.
So
it's the active ingredient in
it's
magic
the active
mushrooms.
yeah. So what makes you hallucinate? If you have a mystical experience, he calls it, which is super loosely defined, but let's call it even let's us more define it. A religious experience.
Okay.
So any sort of maybe a feeling of contact or visions with the holy in any way you see fit. Could be Christian, could be otherwise, doesn't matter. We'll go with Christian because he does. Leads to smoking cessation or higher increase in smoking cessation. That being, if you are indeed a smoker, you will be less likely to want a cigarette again. I think he used 85% or something.
I don't know. It was
more
some
likely.
statistic.
Some statistic. Anyway, Matt Dillahunty goes, and I guess Jordan Peterson claims that is evidence for mystical events.
Yeah.
Happening.
Which I highly disagree with.
Which-
As someone who has taken the drug he's talking about, he is wrong.
And Matt Dillahunty...
I guarantee Matt's probably taking it too. I know
Matt's taking it. He said it on stage during this. He
Okay.
said, like, I've had really good trips. But Matt says, and he does it very calmly, which is a credit to him. No, that's evidence that people who have a mystical experience while taking psilocybin will experience smoking cessation. Yep. It's not evidence of the mystical experience being valid.
Right.
Which is true.
The highest I ever was on mushrooms, I knew even at the time this wasn't the case, but when I'm on a trip, it's kind of like, I haven't done it in a very long time.
You kind of go with it.
You kind of just go with it,
Yeah.
and it's just a fun time. Like, I felt like I could see the fractals of the universe and how I don't have... it's an
the Legos of the universe.
It's ineffable. Basically, I saw, like, the gears of the universe. I saw how everything was functioning in concert with everything, and it's a drug.
That sounds cool.
It does. It's a drug. You're high on drugs. That's what it does. And then you're just not on the drugs anymore, and you go, all right, that was a good time.
Yeah.
That was drugs, not magic.
Too bad you weren't a smoker.
Yeah. I'd still probably be smoking.
Yeah. I don't...
Although I did watch Moana once. Don't do that. I've learned, apparently, the reason you're not supposed to look at, like, big things like water when you're on mushrooms.
Why is that?
It's too, like...
It's too expansive?
It's too vast and empty and moving, and it gets you, like... Ah!
I see.
And I guess I didn't realize that.
Oh, that makes sense, I guess. I had a friend who went golfing on mushrooms.
How'd they score?
I have no idea because he broke his hand. This was back in, like, just after high school. There was a large rock as part of, the courses have, like, different obstacles and stuff. There was a rock off to the side somewhere. It was just a large one. And he thought it was a big turtle talking shit. And so he punched it. And he broke his hand.
Jordan Peterson, that guy broke his hand, which is real, because of a thing that happened. Does that mean there was an actual talking turtle? I don't know.
Because he experienced it. It was his subjective experience.
Right.
There was a talking turtle. Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Anyway. It is women as nature who looks at half of all men and says no. The no is in caps and in quotes, and there's a fucking exclamation point. Sorry, that's just... Come on. For the men, there's a direct encounter with chaos, and it occurs with devastating force every time they are turned down for a date.
Okay.
Again, I say king of the incels, specifically because at no point in this does he ever, like, see this from the perspective of a woman, and, like, turning, like, to him... An interaction where a man is told no by a woman, spurned for whatever reason, is a one-sided interaction. It's like he doesn't even take a second to consider there is a second person on the end of the interaction with a brain, thinking their own things, with their own concerns and livelihood, and you know what I mean?
Right, like what about her? What if, like, you asking was, like, bad for her?
Sure.
Like, what if the way you asked, it could be anything, and it could seem innocent to you. You might not have actually done anything wrong. Like, what if she feels an even more intense negative emotion by turning you down? Like, maybe even guilt.
Sure.
Like, oh, you're a really nice guy, but I don't feel that way about you, and you know, there are people, like, they say that I don't want to ruin our friendship thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's true. They don't want to ruin the friendship because they actually don't.
Yeah.
And that goes for guys as well. I accidentally made a girl cry once.
Oh.
She asked me on a date, and I laughed. Because I thought she was joking.
Oh.
And she wasn't. Because I didn't have any sort of attraction to her whatsoever. I just thought, that's a person I talk to occasionally. She goes, "You want to go to the movies with me and a friend?" I was like, no.
Oh.
And she cried.
That makes me sad.
Yeah, I didn't, I don't really care now, really, that much. But, like, I did that to a woman. What is that add? I don't know how that adds up in this math.
It doesn't come up in the book.
It doesn't.
Human female choosiness.
Ah!
Human female choosiness are words he decided to write.
Implying that choosiness, like being, like if you're a woman, you have any sort of standard, and it doesn't have to be superficial. It doesn't have to be tall, dark, and handsome. It could be like, I don't want him to have, I don't know, mental issues where he's aggressive. I don't want someone who is racist.
See, I don't think those kind of considerations come into Jordan B. Peterson's mind,
That's what I'm saying.
Because in the first chapter about Lobsters, he was talking about dominance hierarchies and how all females try and get to the top of the dominance hierarchy.
That's
by
not
fucking...
true.
So again, it comes down to this almost 4chan level of thinking where it's like all those fucking Chads and Stacys out there fucking each other. That's why I'm not getting laid. No.
Maybe you're just an asshole. Maybe you're just... And it has nothing... like.
And maybe you have weird obsessions with mythology and, like, dominance hierarchies.
Am I the greatest looking guy in the world? No. I'm not hyper fit by any stretch of the imagination. I've never really had a problem.
You've never had a problem.
I have never had a problem.
Honestly, to my befuddlement, it amazes me how much game
I'm
you
very
have.
charming.
It's insane.
It's not game. Like, it's not like I'm hooking up with people. They're relationships.
No, but
right?
you're just like, you got a personality people latch onto.
That's very clear.
I guarantee you've been the center of every friend group you've ever been a part of. And everyone else is
It's not even by me. It's not my choosing. People go, like you. You're my little polyp, and I love you to death. No, it's weird. Like, my friend, like, I'm the catalyst, but, like, I'm not the top of the lobster hierarchy, right? Am I the objective? No. I kick out of my coverage all the time. Like, it's ridiculous. There's no reason this, besides my personality, like, I mean this in the way he mentions it.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, and I know a lot of people like this. You don't have the best job. You don't have an 8-pack. You're not, like, great looking. I don't think I'm ugly by any stretch, but I'm certainly not fucking, I don't know, Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
My dick doesn't vibrate. I don't have anything to offer besides, like, the me on the inside part.
Yeah.
Who the fuck? Like, and it goes for women, too. Like, there's a lot of women out there who might be really successful, gorgeous, I don't know, alpha women, but they're alone. It's not because of... Maybe they're a piece of garbage. Maybe they're a bad person.
I don't know. We're not looking for breeding stock.
I guess, yeah, that's really what it is. We're not just... People aren't out here going like, oh, I'm gonna come in her and make me some high grade A babies. You know? Some people do, but...
Human female choosiness is also why there are very different common ancestors we share with our chimpanzee cousins, while the latter are very much the same. Women's proclivity to say no more than any other force has shaped our evolution into the creative, industrious, upright, large-brained, competitive, aggressive, domineering creatures we are.
You think women in this species saying no to the men for anything, I think you mean sex, but for anything, is what led to our ingenuity? What led to the creation of the internet and antibiotics and the Manhattan Project? You think that, like, we didn't start with, like, like, we're over here, we're going, you and I, we're cave people.
Okay. Got a rock.
And of course, we walk over to a cave lady and she's like, no, I'm good. And we're like, fuck! I'm gonna invent the ladder so I can get the fruit at the top of that tree. Because she said no to me.
I have a rock.
You can hit the tree with a rock.
I hit the lady with the rock.
Good. Because she deserves it. Because she said no.
Continuing. It is nature as women who says, well, bucko, you're good enough for a friend, but my experience of you so far has not indicated the suitability of your genetic material for continued propagation.
Do you think that's what women...
I think he's being hyperbolic. He's intentionally saying it in such a way, but he's...
There's a baseline where, a woman might think, I'm not going to marry that guy. If I want kids, is this the guy I want kids with?
Sure.
But men do that too! Like, come on. Like, not every relationship is going to end in procreation or start in procreation. Procreation might never enter the conversation in some relationships. Not just same-sex ones, by the way. In heterosexual relationships, procreation might be off the table. And not for medical reasons, but because kids are garbage.
We all have a palatable sense of the chaos lurking under everything familiar. That's why we understand the strange, surreal stories of Pinocchio and Sleeping Beauty and The Lion King and The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast. You weren't kidding. Those are all those are the Disney movies he knows.
Yes, yes they are.
Huh. With the eternal landscapes, known and unknown world and underworld, we've all been in both places many times, sometimes by happenstance, sometimes by choice. Many things begin to fall into place when you begin to consciously understand the world in this manner. It's as if the knowledge of your body and soul falls into alignment with the knowledge of your intellect. It's this, again, let me read that last bit again.
Yeah, one more time.
Many of the things begin to fall into place when you begin to consciously understand the world in this manner. It's as if the knowledge of your body and soul falls into alignment with the knowledge of your intellect.
You know, your soul, that thing that exists.
That sentence means nothing. People call this guy the Deepak Chopra of Christianity.
Not for no reason.
Deepak Chopra, I think, has more substantive things to say than this guy.
I don't know. Deepak blocked me. Deepak blocked me back in, maybe 4 years ago. I was like, hey, that doesn't mean things. And he's like, boop, blocked.
Yeah. Alright, so this section is all about Adam and Eve, and this is how he gets into talking about why you should care about yourself and treat yourself like you treat people you are responsible for caring for, like your pets, the example that he gave earlier. The thing is, he spends most of the time kind of talking about how shitty human beings are and original sin, and I have no idea by the end of this why he decided to wrap the entire argument around Adam and Eve, because at the end of the day it could have been anything.
Maybe we'll discover it the third time through.
We'll see.
Together this time.
In any case, there's a serpent in the garden, and he's a subtle beast, according to the ancient story. Difficult to see, vaporous, cunning, deceitful, and treacherous. It therefore comes as no surprise when he decides to play a trick on Eve. Why Eve instead of Adam? It could just be chance, it was 50-50 for Eve, statistically speaking, and those are pretty high odds. But I have learned that these old stories contain nothing superfluous, anything accidental, anything that does not serve the plot has long been forgotten in the telling. As the Russian playwright Anton Chekhov advised, if there's a rifle hanging on the wall in Act 1, it must be fired in the next act.
That's not true.
That's the famous Chekhov's gun screenwriting thing, though.
Sure, but there's lots of superfluous information. Like, for instance, I guess the gun on the wall in this scenario could be the cherub. He mentions cherubim and a flaming sword. That never comes up again. It's a gun on the wall that you never shoot.
Perhaps primordial Eve had more reason to attend to serpents than Adam. Maybe they were more likely, for example, to prey on her tree-dwelling infants. Perhaps it is this reason that Eve's daughters are more protective, self-conscious, fearful, and nervous to this day.
That means women. Eve's daughters equal women.
He's saying women... Oh, God.
Just say it one more time. Women are
more protective, self-conscious, fearful, and nervous to this day. He apparently hasn't seen me in a butterfly house. Not a fan!
Like, the idea that being a woman means you will be more likely to be these things, is that even based in any experience? Like statistical or otherwise?
I'm not saying there aren't differences between genders.
There absolutely
there
are.
But to straight up stereotype to this level of generalization is reducto ad absurdum. It's just ridiculous. At this point, you could say anything about anyone. You're reducing complex human beings down to these archetypes to the point that they no longer resemble human beings anymore. It's not how it works.
It's like an alien wrote a book about what he thinks humans are like.
Which would make sense considering he likes to call women human females. Like a fucking weirdo. Anyway. Now, no clear-seeing conscious woman is going to tolerate an unawakened man. This is where he's talking about why Eve took the apple or whatever fruit it was.
Women are intolerant of of men who aren't at their, he says awakenness.
Woke.
I don't think he's invoking that, but he could be. It makes sense. Let's just say a level of intelligence.
Sure.
I think. Is that the case?
I don't know.
I think most people like to be kind of at least roughly equivalent to their partner in some way, like emotionally, ideologically speaking, maybe interests and intelligence. Like, I think all of those factors, like, and there's probably a plus or minus involved, but I can't imagine there's lots of relationships where someone has a 70 IQ and the other one has a 170 IQ.
Yeah. So Eve immediately shares the fruit with Adam. That makes him self-conscious. Little has changed. Women have been making men self-conscious since the beginning of time. They do this primarily by rejecting them, but they also do it by shaming them if men do not take responsibility, since women bear the primary burden of reproduction.
Jordan Peterson fans, I thought you didn't believe in toxic masculinity. Am I crazy here? Like, he's just you can call it anything. We called it like negative stereotypes informed by gender to get away from the stigma of the term toxic masculinity. But like that's the definition.
I just don't understand.
That's an example of a very definitive experience a man can have being shamed by anyone based on the fact that they are a man and the expectations that are implicit with that gender. That is exactly what negative experiences informed by gender are. Like, that's what it is. And he says it. You're a fan of Jordan Peterson. He says the words that we said in like 3 videos ago about this. Do you now agree or disagree with us? If you disagree with us, you disagree with Jordan. I know. You want to move on. That bothers me. That bothers me a lot. He says it.
Now you may ask, what in the world have snakes got to do with vision? Well, first, it's clearly of some importance to see them, because they might prey on you. Dr. Lynn Isabel, professor of anthropology and animal behavior at the University of California, has suggested that cunningly acute vision almost uniquely possessed by human beings, well, that's not true, there's plenty of
acute vision.
Like, for instance, birds, hawks have very good sight because they need to see stuff scurrying so they can swoop down. Anyway, beside the point. She has suggested that the stunningly acute vision almost uniquely possessed by human beings was an adaptation forced on us tens of millions of years ago by the necessity of detecting and avoiding the terrible danger of snakes, with whom our ancestors co-evolved. This is perhaps one of the reasons the snake features in the Garden of Paradise as the creature who gave us the vision of God.
It wouldn't just be snakes.
No, hold on. Let me explain what he just said there. Jordan Peterson is claiming that the reason that the snake is the thing to give us the vision of God in the Bible is because evolutionarily, the reason we have good actual literal vision with our eyeballs is because of needing to see things like snakes. And he thinks that's the reason the story is constructed in that way.
That ignores Jewish culture.
That ignores
Hebrew culture, not Jewish, but yeah.
It implies
Canaanites.
It implies a knowledge of evolution, of some sort of pre-mindset that went into writing the story that you just couldn't know. It's very similar to recently the thing he said about the snakes around the staff being like proof that they knew about DNA a long time ago.
The double helix?
The double helix shit.
So this is Foxy and Nuwa. I think I've got that right. But I just love that representation. It's so insanely cool, this representation. So you see the sort of the primary mother and father of humanity emerging from this underlying snake-like entity with its tails tangled together. I think that's I really do believe this, although it's very complicated to explain why. I really believe that's a representation of DNA. So, and that representation, that entwined double helix, that is everywhere. You can see it in Australian Aboriginal art, and I'm using the Australians as an example because they were isolated in Australia for like 50,000 years. They're the most archaic people that were ever discovered, and they have clear representations of these double helix structures in their art. So, and those are the two giant serpents out of which the world is made, roughly speaking. It's the same thing, you see that in the staff of Asclepius, which is the healing symbol that physicians use, although usually that's only one snake, but sometimes it's two.
Sometimes he'll let slip.
That is like, I've heard that, and I'm not being hyperbolic, I've heard that in Ancient Aliens.
Literally, every once in a while, he'll let slip something so crazy you go, oh, I'm totally right in assessing that this person has no idea what they're talking about. He knows how to speak.
Yeah.
He knows how to use words.
I'm sure he knows stuff about things.
But the fact that he drew the connection like, oh, evolution makes maybe we'd see things because snakes in the Bible, that's why it's in the Bible.
I mean, he even, like, he has almost a cursory knowledge of it, because under this, he'll mention, like, sight is important to see, like, fruit and trees and see if they're ripe or not.
Yeah.
Like, that's obviously more in line with the scientific reasons behind the different things that organisms see, because we're specialized to see certain things because it was more beneficial for our ancestors to be able to see in color acutely different and different vibrant colors. And so we associate bad smells with things we shouldn't eat, even if we can eat them.
Sure.
Like the durian fruit.
Yeah.
Some people found that was actually okay to eat at some point. And there's a large culture of people that have grown up and descended from people who are fine with that, and so that smell doesn't evoke the disgust it evokes in Westerners who don't experience it. I mean, it's stuff like that. I have no idea why he can cross the road over to evolutionary materialism and actual like selection pressure and the way that even though he negatively invokes Darwinian experiences pretty often, how he can cross the street and like buddy up with that, and then go back over to Jordan B. Peterson home, where like, you know, it's about the soul and it's about like expression and poetry, and it's so fucking odd. It doesn't add up at all. There's no evidence to support any of that, and it's just fucking wild. It's wild.
This is after God is going into the garden to look for them, after they've eaten the fruit. God says, "Who told you that you were naked? Did you eat something you weren't supposed to?" And Adam, in his wretchedness, points right to Eve, his love, his partner, his soulmate, and snitches on her. And then he blames God. He says, "The woman whom you gave to me, she gave it to me and I ate it." How pathetic and how accurate. The first woman made the first man self-conscious and resentful. Then the first man blamed the woman, and then the first man blamed God. This is exactly how every spurned man feels.
I don't have to interpret that for you, right? Like, you got that? You understand?
To this day, first he feels small in front of the potential object of his love, after she denigrates his reproductive suitability. Jesus Christ.
Did she?
Think about your balls a little less, Jordan.
The story the story of Adam and Eve is, and he mentions it, and I don't know why he glosses over it, they are offered the fruit of the tree of life, which they can just eat whenever they want, and then the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, which again we discuss in Atheist Bible Study number 1, 2, and maybe a little bit in 3. She's basically wants to be open-minded and have an experience, and the idea here is that Satan is like, hey, here's this, but then you can't live forever, whatever. And then the implication in the book is not that she's spurning or Adam is inadequate in any way. The implication in the Bible is she just shares it. She shares it because that's what you do when you have food with people. Like, you just share. Yeah. It's kind of this air of hospitality, a motif that runs throughout the Bible.
Especially the early Old Testament.
And especially women to men. It doesn't read like in any way that Adam is inadequate for especially reproduction, since they reproduce. I mean, it's so bizarre that you take that spin on it at all. Like, especially given like how much we've read the Bible. Yeah. Like, there's just I don't add up with this at all. Like, even a Christian should be like, no.
Any of the spurned, not suitable for reproduction, if you read that out of the Bible, That's coming out of you, not the Bible.
Yeah, that's absolutely 100% a projection of Jordan Peterson, and I cannot believe I'm defending the Bible right now.
It's just weird.
Me, like we're defending the thing this whole channel's based on.
Yep.
Okay.
At least the woman had the serpent to blame, and it later turns out that snake is Satan himself. Unlikely as that seems.
He does go into, and I guess to his credit, like he tries... It's almost like poking holes and then putting tape over the holes you poked.
Yeah.
In the story,
he's like, oh, the serpent, it's not Satan. Later they said it was Satan, which is accurate, but again, you still are... It's weird the selectiveness with which he will poke holes in the Bible stories.
Right, because he is fully comfortable with using the serpent as a representative of chaos, which is Satan, and he mentions that. He's absolutely comfortable with that, but he's not comfortable with it being interpreted modernly like it is. I don't know. He's so fucking odd.
Yeah. And so we return to our original query. Why would someone buy prescription medications for his dog and then so carefully administer it when he would not do the same for himself? Now you have the answer, derived from the foundational texts of mankind. He's talking about the Adam and Eve story.
Do we have the answer?
According to him. Why should anyone take care of anything as naked, ugly, ashamed, frightened, worthless, cowardly, resentful, defensive, and accusatory as a descendant of Adam, even if that thing, that being, is himself?
So this is just Catholic? Was Jordan Peterson Catholic?
I don't know, but I don't think he is.
He wasn't Catholic.
But a lot of it comes this self-hatred, this weird self-hatred idea.
Yeah, an original sin, by the way, which I think maybe there is I think he's tapping into this, and I could be maybe a little stretching, but I don't think I am. There is this narrative and this common retort against hard left, what he has called out loud feminazis, where like maleness is inherently a bad thing, which I agree is a bad way to approach any sort of topic like that.
Sure.
Like just being a man means like the people that say like, oh, men should have a curfew after 9. Or men should live over here, women live over here. You know, the very, very extreme fringe left that people like Jordan Peterson and his fans and, Paul Joseph Watson, those people like to make fun of. And there is an idea of original sin in maleness within that, and a common retort is, I don't buy into your idea that being male is an original sin. I feel like he's tapping into that. And I know he's not saying it in so many words, but a descendant of Adam, before the children of Eve were women. So the descendants of Adam inherently means men here. And I mean, that's what he's talking about. He's talking about men being spurned by women in that paragraph.
He says, I don't mean to exclude women with that phrasing. Then why did you phrase it like that?
That's what I'm saying. So I think he adds those caveats at the end to... Oh, yeah. So I can't pin him for that because he says this.
He does. A lot.
But I'm pinning him for that. I don't care.
Only man could conceive of the rack, the iron maiden, and the thumbscrew. Only man will inflict suffering for the sake of suffering. Polar bears will hunt for sport.
Chimpanzees that he cites earlier, rape without procreative intention. Killer whales, maim for fun. Dolphins rape, ducks rape. I don't think ducks are quite as social as the others, but
sure.
Like there's lots of things that do stuff for fun, and some of it may be considered just evil. Like there are chimpanzee groups, and we talked about this with we were at a debate, and it was the problem of evil was part of the debate was there are chimpanzees kind of tribe up.
Yeah.
And they will go in and slaughter violently groups of chimpanzees and not take that territory that's left over. They'll just go back to their own. It has no gain whatsoever. It's just pure violence.
Sure.
Is that not pain for the sake of it? Is that not...
Jordan Peterson he picks and chooses. It's what he does. And this entire section, by the way, is about how specifically he considers human beings unique in their ability to hurt other human beings.
But as a Jordan Peterson fan, you do agree with him, of course, that we are akin to chimpanzees in the way we socialize, correct? Because he just cited that not too long ago. Sure. We read that out loud. Sure. So, do you disagree with Jordan Peterson? Because if you disagree with Jordan Peterson, you can disagree with me too. But if you agree with Jordan Peterson, you have to agree with what I just said. So, like, your brain's probably shutting down at this point. Crack into that lobster and join us for the rest of this video.
We remain eternally nostalgic for the innocence of childhood, the divine, unconscious being of the animal, the untouched cathedral-like old-growth forest. We find respite in such things. We worship them, even if we are self-proclaimed atheistic environmentalists of the most anti-human sort.
Anti-human?
Let me explain that. Jordan Peterson doesn't think climate change is a thing.
Doesn't he?
No, he doesn't think anthropogenic climate change is a thing. So he believes, I would imagine when he's saying something like that, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm guessing his meaning is people who want, for instance, to implement a carbon tax. Sure. You're being anti-humanity because think of the gerbs.
Gerbs?
Jobs.
Oh, jobs.
Jobs. He's thinking about industry and jobs more so than like the environment that we need to live in.
Wouldn't funding environmentally protective jobs be jobs?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. Do we need more people in mines than we need solar people?
I don't know. Also, self-proclaimed atheistic environmentalist. Self-proclaimed, meaning he doesn't think you're a fucking atheist.
Yeah.
We mentioned that earlier. So here's a proposition. Perhaps it is not simply the emergence of self-consciousness and the rise of our moral knowledge of death and the fall that besets us and makes us doubt our own worth. Perhaps it is instead our unwillingness, reflected in Adam's shamed hiding to walk with God despite our frailty and propensity for evil. Again, bringing up that walk with God thing and using it as a synonym for walking the correct path. This is not a thing secular people tend to do when they're trying to get points across that are largely secular.
Unless you're trying to talk to a religious group.
Sure.
And I think that's... He's either... There's only two ways about it. He's either religious, which is fine, but
he's Christian.
He says he isn't.
I know I've seen a video where he says, yeah, I'm Christian, but in the sense that I don't know if he thinks there's a literal Jesus, but he doesn't think reality is a thing, so he believes in Christianity morally at the very least. I don't know how much of the specifics he believes
as a moral
real.
System. I've had this debate as well, which I think is just insanity, but so he's either that, which you have to agree to, or he's exploiting those who are for his benefit. Otherwise, he wouldn't use this language. It's not metaphor. It's direct similarity. Like, walking with God is following these 12 rules.
If we wish to take care of ourselves properly, we would have to respect ourselves, but we don't, because we are not least in our own eyes fallen creatures. If we lived in truth, if we spoke truth is with a capital T, by the way. What truth would you capitalize with a capital T, Jake?
God's truth.
God's truth! Then we could walk with God once again and respect ourselves and others and the world. Then we might treat ourselves like people we cared for. We might strive to set the world straight. We might orient toward heaven, where we would want people we cared for to dwell instead of hell, where our resentment and hatred would eventually sentence everyone.
Again... If pure order is a problem, then heaven is a problem. But he doesn't seem to be able to reconcile those two things in that thought. That's the passage I was mentioning earlier when I was discussing this. It just doesn't make any goddamn sense. Also, apparently Jordan Peterson's ultimate goal is heaven and not hell, where we would want our people to reside. By walking the godly path.
It's all metaphorical, except when it isn't, except it all is.
We're taking him out of context.
No, we're not. Read the fucking book.
It's
way worse than we're making it out to be. Many people, they have the opposite problem. They shoulder intolerable burdens of self-disgust, self-contempt, shame, and self-consciousness. Thus, instead of narcissistically inflating their own importance, they don't value themselves at all, and they don't take care of themselves with attention and skill. It seems that people often don't really believe that they deserve the best care. Personally speaking, they are excruciatingly aware of their own faults and inadequacies, real and exaggerated, and ashamed and doubtful of their own value. They believe that other people shouldn't suffer, and they will work diligently and altruistically to help them alleviate it. They extend the same courtesy even to the animals they are acquainted with, but not so easily to themselves. It is true that the idea of virtuous self-sacrifice is deeply embedded in Western culture, at least insofar as the West has been influenced by Christianity, which is based on the immediation of someone who performed the ultimate self-sacrifice. He's literally saying...
He's invoking Christ.
He's literally saying, Western ideology, the idea of virtuous self-sacrifice, only exists in Western canon because Jesus.
Seppuku.
I'm just saying,
Okay.
Don't get me wrong. Western society, you go to martyr story, Jesus is the top one. I'm not going to argue.
Jesus is definitely the most popular
I'm
martyr
not going to
story.
argue with you on that because it's true. But to say that the entire reason our culture values the idea of self-sacrifice is just because Jesus is once again such a reductive, ludicrous statement. I don't know how anyone takes it seriously.
But see, that's the, like, I self-sacrifice for charities, and not all of them, but some of them.
Sure.
I self-sacrifice for my friends. I self-sacrifice for my loved ones. But I don't ever, I wasn't raised religious, I don't ever invoke Jesus. And I know that the argument against this is, well, you were raised in a society that does. I guess, but like my parents weren't religious. I didn't grow up in an environment where that was a concept. And the media I took in didn't have religious back. I don't know. Like, all the arguments are going to go to, well, yeah, because you live in a post-Jesus society at any point. But, like, you can have a secular morality, and I'll explain it to you right now. If you don't have food, and you're starving, and maybe I don't have a lot of food, but I will self-sacrifice to give you some food to make sure, I can do that in a purely selfish way, in hopes that you or people watching or other people that you tell about it will treat me with that same courtesy if I ever don't have food. It's purely selfish. It's purely in my best interest to help others to live the best life. I mean, they have this discussion on stage with Matt Dillahunty, where they have the example of throwing, who's that neuroscientist? Sam Harris. Where they... if I could throw Sam Harris off the stage, but it's in my best interest not to, because I don't want other people to treat me the way I treated Sam Harris.
Sure.
So I treat Sam Harris as a person with respect who has bodily autonomy. I'm not going to take him now, but if the stage was on fire and I throw him off, that is how I would want to. I don't know. Like, there's so many of these concrete do or do nots that just don't apply to actual morality. And the fact that you even have, if you even have a thought in your head that, like, Jordan Peterson will say he's not homophobic. And he might even, I don't know if this is true, he might even support gay marriage, right?
I doubt he does.
I doubt he does too, but let's say he does. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say Jordan Peterson does. I find it moral to allow people to express love with one another in the form of marriage,
that is
regardless of sex. That is directly in opposition to the Bible.
Yeah.
And that is in direct opposition to walking the path of God.
And it's direct opposition to most of Western thought for the last 500 years.
It's in direct opposition to 12 rules, because it leads to no procreative practice. You could argue that there was a recent 2 dads, 1 egg, a surrogate, and there was like a mishap with something, and it ended up working, I guess. So you could argue that, sure, gay people may be able to reproduce someday, but it's just so contradictory to actual reality.
Yeah. If I am someone's friend, family member, or lover, then I am morally obligated to bargain as hard on my own behalf as they are on theirs. If I fail to do so, I will end up a slave and the other person a tyrant. What good is that? This confused me. I had to read this a few times because the way he looks at relationships with friends and family...
Stuff you do to people, not with them.
It's very bizarre.
Yeah.
It's like he treats relationships like a zero-sum game where it's what am I getting out of it? What are you getting out of it? What's the...
Yeah, there should be a cost-benefit ratio.
And I know you were talking earlier about, like, helping other people because you want to treat people the way other people you want to be treated. But, like, empathy also comes into it. I don't get the feeling of empathy in his, like, dissection of what relationships are. Again, just another weird moment.
Empathy at the same time can be construed as selfish, though, because it makes you feel good to help another person. So, I mean...
Read The Selfish Gene if you want to hear more about this.
Or watch a Matt Dillahunty talk on secular morality and how it's absolutely tenable. And I believe that most of Western culture works on a secular morality anyways, because of the way we,
Here's actually, this is the section where I wrote good. This is actually the one section that I was like, this is a good, solid paragraph where he didn't say a thing I disagreed with.
Jordan Peterson did a good thing. Here it comes.
We deserve some respect. You deserve some respect. You are important to other people as much as to yourself. You have some vital role to play in the unfolding destiny of the world. You are therefore morally obliged to take care of yourself. You should take care of, help, and be good to yourself the same way you would take care of and help and be good to someone you loved and valued. And if that was the whole chapter, great. Jordan Peterson, I agree with you.
Yep.
But that's not what the chapter was.
But... do you see how that's very near the end of the chapter?
That's here. This is the end of the chapter, and the chapter was 30-something pages.
Yeah. So we had to go through all the bullshit to get to... Basically, that's the thesis at the end of the chapter.
Right. And he spent most of the chapter explaining why he thinks you think you're a piece of shit.
Yeah.
So he spends most of the chapter being like... yeah, God fucking thinks you're a piece of shit. Maybe you're a piece of shit. Original sin, whatever. But fuck it. Take care of yourself. In cognitive behavioral therapy, as opposed to this, what I think you would want to do, and I feel so bad for any of his patients if he has any currently, what you want to do is instead of saying, you need to heighten yourself and lift yourself up, and a lot of this is about validation and acceptance of where you already are.
Yeah.
And by setting it up in this way of man as a fallen evil and spending...
a lot of failure available.
And spending the entire chapter talking about the evil of human beings, that is not a at the end of the day, this is a self-help motivational book. You are not helping. It's so bad. It's so not helpful.
Nor are you motivating.
No.
Some people say, I mean, it has a following. I mean, some people think they have been helped, and I genuinely hope they have been. But goddamn, it's in spite of the book. It's not because of it.
No.
It's like you might be reading the chapter names. I think the chapter names in general probably decent advice, like in a really nebulous sort of way.
You just have to ignore basically everything that isn't the specific thesis statement of that.
But even like be precise in your speech, which he is not.
Yeah.
I do disagree with.
Yeah. Anyway, so it ends with, you could help direct the world on its careening trajectory, a bit more toward heaven and a bit more away from hell. Once having understood hell, researched it, so to speak, particularly your own individual hell, you could decide against going there or creating that. You could aim elsewhere. You could, in fact, devote your life to this. That would give you a meaning with a capital M. Again, devote your life to this. It would give you meaning with a capital M. Very religious. That would justify your miserable existence. That would atone for your sinful nature and replace your shame and self-consciousness with natural pride and forthright confidence of someone who has learned once again to walk with God in the garden. You could begin by treating yourself as if you were someone you were responsible for helping.
That's the end of the chapter. Literally, the sentence before just repeating the thesis is the last set of advice he gives.
Learn to walk with God in the Garden of Eden.
Learn to walk with God in the garden. Guys, I'm not writing this book. I'm not going in there and editing stuff. That's what's written in this book. If you don't think this is a religious self-help book, I just don't think you've read it. I think you're giving too much benefit of the doubt. I don't think you're thinking critically. I don't think you're thinking skeptically. I certainly don't... I think you're giving way too much good faith to a guy that doesn't just flat deserve it. No one does. Like, it should be read with, like, why is he saying this? Because he thinks a conservative Christian viewpoint on the world is beneficial. I'm sure he thinks this book actually will help. I don't think he's doing this purely for money, although definitely it helps. I think he's emboldened by the fact that he makes a good living off of this, and it's definitely made him say some further right things. But goddamn, he's been doing this shit for years. He's been a conservative for years. I mean, you've seen the Jordan Peterson and the fedora video. Have you seen that before? Where he's talking about, like, my son was not allowed to throw snowballs today, and he's a sensitive kid, whereas the kids who simply don't care, they're going to be making babies with your daughters. They're going to be the alphas. They're going to be the ones that go on and procreate. Yeah, he said that. Oh. Here's the clip.
Increasingly among my students, I see young men who don't know how to be good men. My son wasn't allowed to throw a snowball, for example, in elementary school. It was against the rules for him to even pick up snow off the ground. It is in that manner that decent boys are made to feel guilty about their masculine impulses. So they withdraw, confused. The more aggressive, psychopathic boys, they simply don't care. So they'll be the ones fathering your grandchildren in the future, if tomorrow's woman can find a man to sleep with at all. That'll keep the testosterone flowing. For The Agenda with Steve Paikin, I'm Jordan Peterson.
I'm just going to assume that made me feel bad inside.
Oh, it made you feel bad inside. Oh, good. It's just spreading conservatism, which, if that's correct, cool, but I don't think it is. No. I don't necessarily think far liberalism is either, but everything that's ever happened in a good way in human ingenuity, like in rights, in freedoms, has been of the progressive nature. I can't think of a conservative...
Well, you can't, because by definition...
Because it sticks to the... Right, that's what I mean. Like, I'm trying to think of, like, when progress is bad inherently. Like, maybe you could make it, like, Skynet, I guess. But, like social progress as far as, like, equality among the sexes. Even though we're not physically equal... We're not. We can try to be.
I would love for anyone to point to me any point in history where we gave, like, equal rights to any group or stopped treating a group of people shitty just because they were different, and it turned out bad. Give me one!
I genuinely can't. And it's not even just about that. It's propagating this idea that there's this great rift in between males and females, men and women in general, and he means biological, he means cisgender. He means biological females that identify as women and biological males that identify as men. And their interaction, like there's some gulf that's insurmountable. You can't get across it at all. That's so unhelpful and dangerous ideologically. And you see that with his supporters. And not just any supporters, like the real... Like, I'm a Jordan B. Peterson fan. I go to the talks and shit. And they're all... Not all. A lot of them are incels. And they're like, why can't I find a woman to sleep with? And he's giving them, like, passes on all the things that they're doing that don't make them compatible with not just women, with fucking people. Like, I don't want to hang out with those guys. Yeah. And it's not because there's a sex thing involved. Neither of us are interested in fucking one another, and certainly neither of us are going to impregnate one another. You're just an asshole. Like, and maybe that's the fucking reason. Like, you're just unlikable. And it has nothing to do with your lobster status in life.
It makes me sad, too, because especially when he talks about, like, men being spurned in this chapter, he talks about, like, oh, the natural reaction again, that claim to the natural.
Implying that being really fucking mad anytime you're turned down is normal.
Right. Trying to normalize that and say that if you are a man and you are turned down by a woman, that feeling of anger and resentment towards
That's
the woman...
valid.
Like...
And useful.
It's not.
It's
and
harmful.
It isn't.
You're right. It's so unhealthy. Not just for the men involved here, which I feel for this.
I do.
Like men need there are needs that men have. We talked about this before, and it got totally glossed over by Jordan Peterson fans. Men do deserve rights. Like I'm not for men getting their rights stripped away. I don't think that happens very often, but I do think there are issues that need to be discussed. But like that's not one of them. Getting denied is not a men's rights issue.
No.
Getting denied is part of life. You'll get denied for a lot of things.
That's a personal you issue.
It's a you issue. Like again, I turned down a girl. Like how does that add up in this? Like, does he think that only women are the ones that go, no?
I'd imagine he would probably say, oh, this is similar, but it doesn't affect the same way women don't...
I don't know, she wept.
Women don't... Women don't look at themselves in the dominance hierarchy the same way men do.
It doesn't matter. I don't know. I just think it's extremely harmful. I don't think you should act this way. And if you are a Jordan Peterson fan, that's fantastic. Whatever, live your life. Be like whatever you want to like, but consider the way you interpret this book. Maybe it's not the way we interpret it, which is great. Sure. Because it means you're not doing these unhealthy things that are definitely being propagated by the book. But if you are, I suggest reconsidering. I really do. And it's not for me. You could downvote you've already downvoted the video. You might not even be watching anymore. But if you're still here, really consider how you treat other people and how they treat you back. Are you being treated like shit? Is asking someone on a date and getting denied actually that big a fucking deal? Do you have any rapport with that person that you asked on a date? Are you friends with that person? Like, the reasons they gave if you asked, do they seem valid? Or are you just totally self-absorbed that you can't even, like, reflect? You know what I mean? Like, getting denied, and not just by women, getting denied in general for anything is part of life, and you gotta be fucking okay with that.
And anger as a reaction.
Not great.
Not healthy. Not generally healthy. Find healthier ways to handle that. Anyway. So that's it for Chapter 2. There's 10 more rules. 10! So you can always follow us on Twitter at PapaBirdJake, at Hugo Reloaded. We have a P.O. Box if you want to send us books or Jordan Peterson stuff in the mail.
Please.
I don't know what that would be. Please don't send us live lobsters. I don't want to. Actually, if
you can send me a voucher for lobster. Red Lobster.
Red Lobster. I love me some Cheddar Bay biscuits.
Get us some Red Lobster gift cards. We'll get lobsters and we'll take pictures.
The final episode of this show, or the final episode of this series,
lobster.
should be filmed at a Red Lobster. Anyway.
They would never let us do that.
You can also donate to our Patreon campaign if you want to help support us. We're not quite at $80,000 a month like Jordan Peterson is. But...
but if everyone watching gave $1, we'd be close.
I'm not as big of a douchebag as Jordan Peterson, so I don't need people's money. Anyway.
If I look at him like, hey, clean your rooms.
Bucko? Is that the key? Have we not been throwing around the word bucko enough? Bucko?
He uses it it's weird.
Bucko?
It's not like it's ubiquitous. It's not like just replete with buckos.
But when he uses
it's so much more than the average person. It's super bizarre. It's like if I called everyone Tater.
Yeah.
It like sticks out. You know, like, bucko.
It's like when you call things boys all the time.
Yeah, that's kind of thing me and my girlfriend do.
Yeah.
It's funny. But I don't think it's... Yeah.
Spicy boys.
Spicy boys.
Those are fire ants. They're not. They're spicy boys.
They're spicy boys.
The petition got the number that...
I want to turn that cold boy on.
Yeah.
It's pretty fucking hot in here.
So, that's it. Until next time, I'm Hugo.
Jake.
And I'm gonna go and treat myself like a normal human being, and not...
What's that include? Self-flagellation?
Yeah, generally,
yeah,
I think.
A little flagellation. Snowballing. Look that up if you want.
Why didn't you close the tab when you looked it up? Why do we gotta be here for this?
I don't know why we gotta be here for that. That wasn't nice. That wasn't a thing. I sort of brought it on ourselves, I guess. Anyway, click on these videos and stuff. There's lots of really good content here. We work real hard.
Do you think they're ever gonna let us out of this box?
No, that's where we're at now.
So, Red Letter Media's got something.
Think so?
Yeah.
That's a crapshoot. I hope that's the case.